What's up, everyone? We're back for another episode of Locked On Bucks. The Bucks have just wrapped up their fourth preseason game, and it's the preseason, so it's the perfect time to make declarations about Giannis's jump shot. He brought the full package to Utah, and Khris Middleton as well. We've spoken about Khris Middleton and a little bit of preseason rust in years gone by. He looks pretty damn good, so there's plenty to talk about from that game, so let's get into it.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Bucks. I'm your host, Kane Pittman, here alongside the founder of brewhoop.com and longtime voice of the podcast, short-time face of the podcast, Frank Madden. The Bucks, and you know, we read out the scores to these games, Frank, and you know, in the end, the score doesn't really matter. I think the Jazz, for the most part, didn't play their starters in the second half. The Bucks didn't play Giannis and all these guys in the fourth quarter. But I thought overall it was a pretty entertaining game. The Bucks went down 124 to 120. I feel like we should start this with Giannis, though. I think you mentioned this, Frank, in our DM this morning when I woke up, and you said, well, I guess there's not too much to worry about Giannis' knee, and he looked pretty good in that first preseason outing that we saw tonight. He had 21 points in 21 minutes, really looked unstoppable. It's always going to be something that's there in the background, but I think that's the main news story from this preseason, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think just generally the Bucks looking overall. I mean, obviously Khris and Drew coming off also very short off seasons, even shorter off seasons than Giannis, but obviously the difference with them is that they didn't have, you know, a near catastrophic knee injury in the Atlanta series. But yeah, I mean, I know we had discussed it when, you know, sort of the news was breaking right before training camp that Giannis was still saying that he was, you know, still hurt, and then on media day not practicing that those first few days. You know, I know we were sort of speculating about, like, is he going to play it all in the preseason? Is he going to show up for like the last game? I think we've talked about he's played 2 or 3 preseason games each of the last 4 years, so he's played fairly limited preseasons. That's a pretty normal thing at this point. But I thought it was a good sign that, you know, he was back in practice the first week, going 5-on-5 of training camp. So obviously they felt, you know, comfortable enough that he could be out there doing a 5-on-5. And then you know, it was great to see him out on the floor. He made some very athletic plays. He was, you know, assist hunting, as he sometimes likes to do when he's sort of feeling it, especially in a blowout game against Oklahoma City. And so, you know, that was probably the most encouraging thing, just seeing him look like Giannis, basically. And I thought maybe they would rest him tonight in Utah, given it's a road game, and you still have the Friday game at home, which presumably you're going to play him at home right before the preseason ends. So I thought, oh, maybe they'll just, you know, rest the guys again tonight. But you know, the injury report has been getting shorter. And other than, I guess, what it was, Shemi was out. Rodney Hood was back, although not really back from the way he played. But I guess it was Dante, Shemi, and I'm forgetting, and Bobby, who were out today. But so it was a little interesting because it was kind of like your starters, and then all the deep bench guys, and you know, we saw like Sandro very early just because, again, Bobby and Shemi are out. So but you know, again, this was the closest we've seen to a full strength Bucks team. We saw the starters start the third quarter, and you know, Giannis, yeah, I think as much as Khris Middleton looked great, again, 25 points on 14 shots. I think Giannis is the story, just because the fact that he's out there playing, he did not slow down. You know, he missed some jump shots the other night after kind of attacking the rim early tonight. Went to that jump shot early, hit 2 out of 3 from deep. Just looked very comfortable shooting the ball, and again, just sort of doing Giannis stuff. So, you know, again, first thing is always just get through these games healthy and move on to the next one, so you can get to the regular season, and then so you can get to the playoffs eventually. It's a grind, it's a marathon, et cetera, et cetera. But I think as far as preseason games go, you know, they just couldn't get over the hump in Utah. They're the world champion Bucks. They still can't win a goddamn game in Utah. Working on 2 decades now of futility in Utah. But hey, I mean, they used to, remember they had the same thing in Phoenix for the longest time, and you know, they end up winning a an NBA championship against the Suns this summer. So, that's the way it goes. I guess we can't get too greedy. I was hoping the bench unit could pull one out there against the Jazz bench late. But yeah, some pretty stark differences. The starters were all plus double digits, and the bench guys, let's just say they did not hold up their end of the bargain. But it's preseason, no big deal. And again, as long as you stay healthy and your kind of key rotation guys, star players are looking good and finding rhythm, I think that's all that matters. And that's what we've seen in these first 2 games with the starters back.
It's been a good ramp up, I think, in minutes, pretty standard, which, as you sort of pointed to, I think gives you the idea that they'll probably play in the third game. If you just look at Giannis, for instance, 17 minutes in the first appearance, 21 tonight. And we've seen it across a number of teams across the league. It almost feels like that 25, 26-minute mark is kind of like the last lead into the regular season. And then they have really only 2 or 3 days off. And then they've got Brooklyn. So I think that'll probably be the path. I would expect that they'll probably play Khris Middleton and those guys in the final game against Dallas, if everyone pulls up okay from this one. Like we always say, thanks for making Locked On Bucks your first listen of every day. Free wherever you get your podcasts. And also now on YouTube. Frank, we're up to 830 subscribers. We're on the road to 1,000. Maybe we can get to 1,000 by the start of next week, by the start of the regular season. Let's set ourselves a target. And the bonus of watching us on YouTube is that you can see Frank is already starting to feel very comfortable with the YouTube. He's installed this fake lightning in the background. I hope it's fake lightning because I'm a little bit worried about your internet connection right now, Frank.
It's a very real lightning storm that is happening in Austin, Texas right now. I had to sit upstairs with my daughter a little bit longer because at 3.5, she's not a big fan of thunderstorms, which is kind of funny to me. I love thunderstorms, and I guess at some point as a little kid, maybe I didn't like thunderstorms, but I always think they're cool, right? I mean, I don't know, thunderstorm's great. I'm one of those people that I like to fall asleep with the sound machine on, and when I'm traveling, I've got the sound app on my phone, and I'll sometimes I don't do thunderstorm, but I'll do rain.
Yeah,
I'll do rain as just sort of background noise to fall asleep to. So I can podcast through a thunder and lightning storm. But yeah, if you're watching us on YouTube, you can literally see the lightning lighting up the my backyard behind me here through the window. So yes, no, we are not putting money into special effects yet on Locked On Bucks on our YouTube channel. But shout out to everybody who's subscribing. And hey, even if you're going to do regular podcast listening, next time you're on YouTube, search for Locked On Bucks. Give us a subscribe. Do us a solid. Help us get to 1,000. Maybe we'll give out some. Maybe we probably need to do a giveaway or something where, I don't know how we'll do it because subscriber names are obviously not real people names typically, but yeah, maybe we need to do something where we give away a prize to one of our subscribers or something. I'm just making this up on the spot. So Kane, we're gonna have to write we might have to write some checks here. It's coming out of your pocket.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't call out people for not subscribing because I don't have a list of names. But I will tell you, I've been speaking with Dave Kane, the radio play-by-play guy, and also Lisa Byington in the last couple of days, and they both subscribe and they both listen. So, look, we're really excited to listen to those guys during the regular season. So it's good to have them listening to the show. I want to talk about the specific jump shots and shots that Giannis was getting in today's game because I think it was a nice variety. He was definitely trying to get to different spots and show some different things. But you spoke about thunderstorms, and if you are a little bit nervous about thunderstorms, perhaps you start to sweat a little bit. And we've got a product that can help you. Sweat Block and Sweat Block wipes. They're doctor recommended. They work for up to 7 days per use. And there is a dry shirt guarantee. If Sweat Block doesn't keep you dry, you can get your money back. It's actually ranked number 1 in the antiperspirant category on Amazon. So there you go. It's obviously doing well. But Sweat Block is stronger and more effective than most clinical antiperspirants. You simply apply it at night before bedtime. Go to bed. The next morning you wake up, wash, and go about your day without having to worry about sweating. That's a guarantee. So you can get it today for 20% off at sweatblock.com with the promo code Locked On, or you can find it on Amazon or at CVS. So Giannis, we've seen him, and listen, it's the preseason, so we're allowed to get as excited as we want or overreact as much as we want, particularly when it comes to Giannis, because typically when you overreact when there's something about Giannis, you can feel a level of confidence that he's going to follow through with that. But I think we saw almost the whole package. So we saw the first jump shot where he sort of brought the ball up in transition, looked like he was going to attack the basket, gave a little bump, said, all right, I'll step back, I'll knock down the jump shot. Then he went to the post free throw fadeaway. We've seen that a fair bit. He really brought that into his game last year. But maybe the highlight for mine was the almost arrogant corner three where the defender was kind of slow to get out there. So then, like every shooter does, he checked his feet. No Kevin Durant stuff going down here. Knocked down the three, looked at the bench. Hey, people are analyzing this on Twitter. They're saying there's a quicker release. They're saying there's a smoother release. What can we take away from this? Because I will say it's fun. It was fun to see him knocking down those shots.
I'm 40 years old, Kane. I mean, this is what you're, whatever, eight of Giannis, whatever it is. I'm too old to get really hyped about this.
Frank, let me just, before you keep going, you told me before we started recording, you want to talk about Giannis' free throws, and he's taken 3 free throws for the whole preseason. So, okay, continue.
I was already going through my head, last year, I think he had, basically there were four different styles of free throw that he went through over the course of the season. And I was like prepared to break down, preseason Giannis, where he was doing that weird elbow tuck that he brought into the first game, and then he switched out of that into a more kind of typical one. And then he had the really long pronounced one where he was taking the deep breaths, and then he got called for the 10-second against Atlanta in January. And the next game against Toronto in Tampa, which was the day of the getting old and weird speech, he started doing the pantomime before he got the ball, and then he did that pretty much until the finals. And then late in the finals, he went to that. He got into that more rush shot thing. That is the Cliff Notes version of Giannis's free throw stylings last year. And yeah, we saw it was the same thing we saw tonight. He gets an and one on Rudy Gobert 3 minutes into the game. The only free throw he shot tonight. Similar thing to what we saw in the previous game. Catches the ball, deep breaths, which he stopped doing at the end of the finals. So in the 17-19 game, he got rid of his deep breaths, but he was still taking a lot of dribbles, because there's basically 2 things that makes Giannis's free throw routine long. It's the deep breaths, contemplating, the cosmic, essence of the universe or whatever he does when he's kind of gathering himself at the beginning. And then there's the 6-7 dribbles that he does after that. And then he has that moment of focus on the rim too. But interestingly, in the finals, he got rid of the deep breaths and just went into the dribbles. Now it seems like he's gotten rid of the dribbles and he's kept the deep breaths. So it's deep breath, 1 dribble, and then up. And look, I would say in general, like free throw shooters, simplify your routine. I think most people would say simplify the routine. Take away all the stuff that creates more variance, can throw you out of rhythm. So I'm all for, a shorter routine, but ultimately it's what makes you comfortable, right? And so we'll see. He front rimmed and in his only free throw of the night. He's now 1 of 3 on the preseason. Who cares about 1 of 3? But obviously he's going to shoot a whole heck of a lot more free throws once the games start counting. So stay tuned, and I will break down every change to Giannis's free throw routine. But I don't know, it does also seem like his elbow, like his right elbow, is getting maybe a little more tucked in than it has been. Like, the people probably seen like the shots of him holding the ball in front of him when he's about to go up. Like, there's been times, especially last year, where it was very pronounced, his elbows kind of going way out, and then as he goes up, and people watching on YouTube can see me pantomiming this change, and it looks really weird because it's reversed in my thing, so I'm becoming a lefty as I do this. But it straightens out as he goes up, and here it looks like it's a little straighter sort of from the start. We'll see. I think people commented on some of these random shooting videos over the summer that looked like he was trying to sort of straighten his elbow out a little bit more, which again, I would say, seems like a wise thing if you were trying to just give people generic advice on how to shoot jump shots or free throws. And we'll see what happens, right? I mean, that's kind of all we can do is just watch it, and we'll see. He missed a couple jumpers in the previous game. He made some tonight. Great, cool. We'll see what translates.
Yeah, and I think the cautionary message with all these things, because the problem with those videos of Giannis knocking down all those jumpers is they were basically feet standing still. They were basically set shots. So this is always the challenge, is that you can practice, and remember, it's been such a short off season to really overhaul anything mechanically, but then you get into a game and then you go back to your habits, or it's what you've done previous years. So we'll see. I had fun tonight, there's no doubt about that, but the Giannis jump shot, we'll always talk about it. I'm sure we'll bring it up multiple times through the season. I will
always talk about it, but I'm not at this point going to like get my hopes up over, mechanical changes, over anything prior to actually an extended sample of good performance. That's my personal rule. I would advise people to also subscribe to that, because I feel like, we've played out different versions of this with different players, right? Luke Bamute. What if Luke Bamute develops that corner three, right? What if Bogut
Well, he did
develops
actually.
Three-point shot? Not, yeah, but in like Houston, right?
So.
Man, how awesome would prime Luke Bamute be on the Bucks right now?
That's a PJ Tucker.
PJ Tucker role. Perfect.
Yeah.
Shout out to Luke.
One of my favorite role players. One of my favorite role players, Luke. Love that guy.
Fresh Prince.
I did tweet tonight, Sam Merrill with Memphis had 30 points. Shout out to Sam, 8 for 13 from 3. He started that game against Indiana, but I tweeted it. And the reason I bring that up is because it's just got the notification. Jordan Nwora quote, they're obviously pretty close. He quote tweeted it and said, keep balling. But it's worth bringing up. Jordan Nwora had 4 assists tonight. And he actually had one really nice bounce pass in transition. He tried one. Yeah. He tried one around the back pass. Not so nice. Sort of missed everyone. But again, we keep looking for these things, and we had a great response to the podcast. We spoke about Jordan Nwora. People are passionate about Jordan Nwora and excited about him. What about George Hill? There's only been a couple of games of action. I saw some people after the first game saying, geez, he doesn't look good. And I was kind of like, well, he's one preseason game. He probably doesn't care about preseason at this point. A couple of games now, George Hill, he came off the bench, played 18 minutes tonight, 8 points, 4 rebounds. Actually got to the free throw line for 4 free throw attempts. Didn't hit any of his threes, though. I don't know. I'm going to need an extended period in the regular season to see George Hill, but I can't be convinced that this still isn't a big upgrade at the backup point guard spot.
Yeah, I think he's just steadier. I mean, like you guys might remember last year, DJ Augustine, like just with his lack of size, like you literally have to play like differently, your pick and roll defense, or you can't switch. You have to hedge with him out, hedge recover. We've seen the Bucks do that with certain players. Like Kyle Korver famously like would kind of hedge and recover, which the Bucks really didn't do with their other defenders in pick and rolls, and obviously they would target Kyle Korver. So yeah, I mean it's just nice having a guy who's rather than you're hoping he's not exposed at point guard, which is the only position you can play him at, which was kind of the DJ/Jeff Teague problem. With George, you hope that he can once again be very competent defensively at the 1, but also be able to swing to the 2. I did think it was funny. They seemed to be switching, and I think it was in the third quarter. They were switching when Whiteside was in on some pick and rolls, and I think George got stuck on. I think Brook Lopez was in the game, if I remember correctly. So it seemed like they were trying to do, screw around with some even with Brook on the floor switching, and George got stuck on Hassan Whiteside a couple times, and obviously that's a very much a struggle for George to try to hold his ground against guys as huge as Hassan Whiteside. But yeah, I think George Hill is one of those guys. Like on the one hand, you want you keep an eye on him because of his age, and he was so good for a role player the last time we saw him, which was literally a year ago. Like the Bucks season, his last season in Milwaukee ended just a little over a year ago, but it's 2 seasons ago now. So, again, when you're in that kind of mid-30s age range, then, sometimes that drop off can come kind of quickly. So I think on the one hand, you're kind of watching him closely, but then on the other hand, as you said, he's a vet. He's getting his reps. He hasn't played a ton in the preseason. And so we'll kind of see what he looks like in the regular season. And I mean, that's the irony too, is that he shot the ball awesomely in 1920. And in his first year in Milwaukee, right, he comes over in the trade in December or whatever it was, and he shot, I think, under 30% with the Bucks that year. But he was still really valuable and really good just because of, again, just getting them into their offense, just, kind of that steadiness going 2 ways. And honestly, with, some of the firepower they have, especially now throwing Drew into the mix and the fact that you can play Drew with George as well, I think, you're obviously not as worried about him, increasing his usage, which I think has typically been sort of one of the frustrating things about George, is that he's a guy who has scored at times. Most notably in his year in Utah, actually, he scored a lot. And then since then, Sacramento, Cleveland, and then Milwaukee just didn't really want to shoot a lot, in spite of, obviously sometimes shooting the ball really well. And he's historically been a pretty good free throw shooter, and he can get to the paint, sometimes get, all the way to the rack, or at least get that little floater. And we saw a couple of those floaters tonight. So we'll see with George, but yeah, I mean, I still feel much better about him versus where we were a year ago at the point guard position. And again, we'll just have to wait till the regular season, I think, to get a little bit better sample. But we'll see. And obviously, I don't know if this makes sense to use a transition point to Jordan Nwora, but if you're putting George Hill out there tonight, it was a little weird because Bud was keeping the three stars together for most of the time. So we saw kind of like more like line shift type substitutions, which you're not going to see in the regular season so much. But so we saw, like, Hill out there with a lot of bench guys. It was like a lot of bench guys in Brook for a few stretches. And it was an interesting opportunity for Jordan because, you mentioned he had that one really nice pass on kind of an overlapping cut by Mamukashvili for a dunk. And he got his jumper working at various points as well, kind of doing some of the things that we like to see. And it was interesting to see him in a game that also featured Jordan Clarkson, because even though obviously size-wise they're very different, I look at Clarkson and the way he's able to be that kind of bench spark plug. I mean, look, Jordan Clarkson averaged 18 points a game last year. I'm not expecting Jordan Nwora to put up 18 points a game, but again, can he bring a little bit of that microwave offense? I don't think you're going to have to twist his arm to take shots. I think if he, again, as we've been saying, if he can find that balance between being aggressive and being a willing passer and playmaker, and at least being somewhat, conscientious as a defender, then I think he's a really interesting piece. Especially, you think about just the rotation right now, and obviously George Hill's going to play. Obviously Pat Connaughton's going to play. Obviously Bobby's going to play when he's healthy. Beyond those three guys, I think if
One
you're
of
Jordan Nwora,
Grayson or Dante. So you're going to have
right?
four guys off the bench.
Dante,
Yeah.
exactly. Dante, obviously he's out for some
Yeah.
period, so Grayson starting. Dante, when he's back, obviously will be that fourth bench guy. But until then, Jordan, I think, has an obvious opportunity because, and we're just messaging with Eric. Eric messaged us this quote from Bud. Shemi is kind of like certainly an interesting piece, and Rodney Hood is probably the other guy, right? I would say I did not see I did not see anything from Rodney Hood tonight in his first outing, coming back from I think a foot problem. But obviously it's been quite a while since Rodney Hood, since 2 seasons ago when he tore his Achilles, since he's looked remotely like the guy that we're used to seeing with him. And so, yeah, I mean, what has Rodney Hood proven to the Milwaukee Bucks? I mean, nothing at this point. Jordan Nwora, I think, certainly has a better claim on minutes than Rodney Hood. But Shemi Ojale is probably the other interesting piece there, especially at the 4 spot, and especially with Bobby out. And I think the comments from Bud after the game, this is the question about, is the small ball lineup out of necessity or something that you think you can really use during the regular season? And Bud said, I think it's a little bit of both, but certainly there's a pretty significant necessity element with Bobby dinged up right now, and Shemi too. And Shemi is going to be that guy that can kind of swing both ways and is a unique player. I think it's kind of allowing us to use PC in some of those small groups, and then Grayson as a wing with him and Khris and Drew, even mixing Jordan in some with that group too. And we'll just see how guys are doing between now and Tuesday when we tip. We've used it probably more in the playoffs, but in the regular season some too. It's just good to have as part of your package. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, I don't think anything's shocking there. I think Shemi's got a calf injury, and we'll see if we see him at all before the regular season. But certainly this is a great opportunity for Jordan Nwora to show that, last year those, garbage time, his garbage time prowess can translate to real rotation minutes. And again, I think summer league was a bit of a throwaway for him, but he's looked very good, I think, throughout the preseason, and you have to give him credit, kind of doing more of the things that the Bucks want him to. And right now, I think Jordan Nwora, I would expect to play on opening night, which is a fun thing given the importance of the Bucks developing some young players and how big of a challenge that's been the past few years.
Well, you mentioned Jordan Clarkson, and he was the sixth man of the year last year. Unfortunately for everyone, Joe Ingles didn't play tonight. He's the second in sixth man of the year voting last season. But Jordan Nwora, I had someone the other day ask, is there any odds for Jordan Nwora for sixth man of the year? And there isn't. And that wasn't a surprise. But I've mentioned before, that Lou Williams, Jamal Crawford type that comes off the bench and scores. So I had an interesting YouTube comment about Jordan Nwora, which I want to bring up. But while we're talking about six man of the year betting, you can find out those odds and all the other odds, whether it's MVP, championship, they're all there at betonline.ag. It's also your number one spot for pro and college football action this season. So you can head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Don't forget to use the promo code Locked On to receive your bonus. And from football, basketball, boxing to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. So the comment in the YouTubes, and I don't have it up here as we're recording here, but
the comment in the YouTubes is
I know
that sounds like something my dad would say.
I was going to let it slide, but if you want to call me out for it, that's totally fine. By the way, I don't know if we've said this story, but paints in the point. Remember we said that one time, and I don't know whether we mentioned this. And
We've said it multiple times. I've said it probably like 3 or 4 times, then you said it once because I was saying it. Yeah. Paints in the point is a tongue twister that I've said in lieu of points in the paint. And yes.
But the good news is that it's not just us. During the postseason, I guess people listen to the podcast more during the postseason, and Zach Lowe messaged us and said, "Oh my goodness, this is one of the most satisfying moments," or whatever. I don't know what word he used. He says, "I say paints in the point all the time, so to hear you guys say that as well makes me feel a lot better as a podcaster." So hey, it's just one of those.
Zach needs us to feel better about himself as a podcaster, obviously. So glad we're doing that for Zach.
Yeah, well, he's small time, low post.
He's just a young. Zach's just a young guy, up and coming, just scrapping and fighting to make it in this world. Good luck to Zach. He is actually a very good dude. I've had a chance to meet Zach a number of times in Vegas and stuff. Very good dude. As good a dude as you would expect, based on his podcast. So shout out to Zach, who is probably not listening to a preseason Locked On Bucks episode, but we know at least that he's listened at some point. Shout out to Zach.
Yeah, I think he's going to make it. So the comment in the YouTubes was around Jordan Nwora, and I said, you know what I think they should be doing with Jordan Nwora? They should be giving him George Hill's minutes. George Hill doesn't need to play at the start of the season. He can play later in the season. And I sort of commented back and said, it's interesting, but they don't really play the same position. But you said something before we took a break there that is at least interesting. So let's just say we've hypothesized about the potential for Jordan Nwora to be sort of the second scorer in lineups if he really does find his way into this rotation. So there might be stretches in a game where you've got Khris Middleton on the floor and maybe Jordan Nwora is out there with him. They're not guys that you are going to be handling the ball through the entire game, but in stretches they can do it. And then maybe if you have a Dante DiVincenzo on the floor, which we know Bud has experimented in the past of trying to use him as a point guard of sorts. I don't know. I think it's at least the idea is interesting. I do think that George Hill is going to play every single night. But again, I think that's why the passing, that's why the ball handling stuff is interesting for Jordan Nwora, because maybe there is some opportunity during the season to experiment with those types of lineups, with those versatile lineups where you might have a Dante, a Jordan Nwora, and maybe it's a Drew Holiday, maybe it's a Giannis, or maybe it's a Khris Middleton. But the fact that you have multiple guys on the floor that can all handle it without what you would call a traditional point guard is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and we haven't really talked about it much, but I think it's great that Jordan Nwora is on the same team as Khris Middleton, because I think you think about Khris and his development, and Khris wasn't even a great 3-point shooter in college. I mean, it's actually pretty remarkable how much he's developed in the pros. And I think the big thing we've seen the last few years, obviously, is the playmaking. And I've said it probably a few years. I think it was a few years ago. I made the comment that I thought Khris was the best passer on the Bucks, and there was a lot of disagreement from my Twitter feed on that. But I think just in terms of just pure passing feel, pick and rolls, lobs. I just think I think we've seen it obviously a ton. He's just got great chemistry with Giannis, very good chemistry with Brooke. And we saw tonight some really nice pick and roll actions. We saw Drew to Giannis. We saw Khris to Giannis. We saw a really nice Khris to Giannis to Khris combination, little tic tac toe for a layup that Khris had on his way to 25 points. I mean, he's looked just locked in here in the preseason. And I think if you're Jordan Nwora, I think you can really take something because we've seen Jordan Nwora use a lot of pick and rolls. We've seen obviously Khris Middleton become a maestro at the pick and roll, and I think a lot of times when you see these scores, that the first instinct is, I can use a pick and roll to create a mismatch or get the defense kind of backing off, whatever it might be, and I can use it to get to my mid-range shot or maybe a step back through, whatever it is. And Khris has really embraced that. I can use this to score, but I can also use this to pass and set up. Oh, by the way, like the most dangerous, rolling player in the sport in Giannis. And so it would be funny. I don't know if Jordan has like run a pick and roll with Giannis. I don't really recall it in the preseason. It would be fun to see that, because that's the kind of thing that obviously would further incentivize Jordan to try to pass a little bit more. But also he's got that little floater shot. He's got the step back that he can use. And like Khris, he's not, in half court, he's not really the guy that's getting to the rim much. We did see Khris knife to the basket a couple of times tonight, but for the most part, he's just trying to get the space so he can get to his jump shot. And obviously that's sort of Jordan's game as well. They're similarly sized on top of that. So yeah, I think, again, he's one of the more, maybe the most intriguing guy, just in the sense that the best players on the Bucks are all extremely well-known quantities, and everybody else is, there's a lot of just sort of like known quantities. I think Grayson Allen, just because he's new and we're curious to see how he fits, is a very intriguing piece. But I think if you're talking about like a guy whose role could swing pretty dramatically, and maybe has upside to be much more than maybe what we would have penciled him in for at the start of camp, right? Which I think we would have said, well, geez, Jordan Nwora is probably not, on our opening night rotation based on what we've seen, given how young he is, and then given summer league, like not much to see there. He's a guy that can actually, become a legit rotation guy this year. And who knows, right? I mean, who knows what he might be able to do, given some consistent minutes, and maybe he gets some comfort there. So, I want to be careful. I think I compared his like his slight upside scenario to Nick Young, to which friend of the podcast, Charlie Saturday, said, corrected me and said Thick Young. So if we need Jordan Nwora nicknames, Thick Young, THICC, that one works. But yeah, I mean, I think as far as guys that he's watching, though, hey, you don't have to look far. Just watch Khris Middleton. Watch how Khris Middleton plays. Watch how he gets to his spots. Watch how he uses his roll men and the type of passer he's become. I mean, that's, I think, a great archetype for Jordan Nwora. I don't think he's ever going to become Khris Middleton as a passer, but if he can weave in a little bit more of that, I think that's certainly a very encouraging thing. And yeah, I mean, especially if Shemi's limited, we know there's minutes at the 4 available. What was Sandro the first? Did Sandro check in for Giannis in the first quarter? Right. I think there's obviously opportunities, and I think Sandro looked like a rookie tonight. We've seen him have some really good performances, especially against the Nets. Tonight was a pretty rough night, just in terms of not seeing shots dropping. I think some foul problems, etc. So yeah, I'm Jordan's definitely a guy that I think is going to be, one of the more interesting players to watch here.
All right. Well, if you play fantasy basketball, it's a massive week for you, because you're probably doing your fantasy drafts. And I see it in my Twitter timeline every day. My Aussie friend, Josh Lloyd, host of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast, is just having a massive week. He's ripping off just endless podcasts right now. You can find them on YouTube as well. So check out the Locked On NBA Fantasy Basketball podcast. And tomorrow on the show, I recorded a crossover episode with our friends from Locked On Nets earlier today. So we assume the Bucks and the Nets are the top 2 teams in the East. So we had a conversation there with those guys, which was super interesting. Obviously, there's just a little bit going on with the Brooklyn Nets right now. So that was a fascinating chat. That's going to be coming tomorrow. And then on the weekend, we'll do a post-game pod. I missed Wednesday to set up the preseason finale against Jason Kidd and the Dallas Mavericks. And the Mavericks won by 68 points today. So, good for those guys. I didn't even know this was possible. 127-59. They beat the Charlotte Hornets. As a man who was in the building for Game 6 against the Chicago Bulls in 2015, that was a real playoff game that the Bucks lost by 54 points. 68 points is next level, though. At one point, they were up by 70 points. It's hard to believe that it's actually a fact, but Jason Kidd, he'll be coming into this preseason game, Frank, ready to go. He's going to have his massive collar. He's going to have a bowling shirt on and ready to coach up the Mavericks.
I was looking at some posts this morning on Twitter looking at changes in pick and roll rates and 3-point percentages from last season to this preseason, which, is that of any value whatsoever, given just the fact that obviously teams like the Bucks have played their starters very few of the aggregate preseason minutes. Probably not, but it was interesting that I think the Mavericks had gone from 38-39% in pick and rolls last year to like high 20s, so like an 11% drop in pick and roll. Hey, if I'm an opponent of the Dallas Mavericks, if you want to run less Luka pick and roll, knock yourself out. Yeah, let's give Kristaps Porzingis more post touches. I don't know. I've not watched the Mavericks in the preseason, so I'm just sort of having some fun with this. But I think they've also dropped off a bit in terms of their 3-point percentage, which Kidd had some comments totally predictably about how they're not going to rely on the 3-point shot as much, which of course is, ironic given how awesome they were offensively, in large part because they spread the floor around Luka and shoot a ton of threes, and that's really what kind of their personnel has sort of dictated. But should be interesting. I'm a little torn because I'm rooting against Jason Kidd, but I have a soft spot for Luka. I have a number of friends who are Mavericks fans, so I don't normally have anything against the Mavs, but I don't know. I may have to. I'm not gonna lie. I kind of want Jason Kidd to fail. Sorry, I said it. So sorry, man.
Look, if he fails spectacularly, then he'll be out of there quickly. I think that's the best case scenario. So we'll see. We'll see how this preseason goes. Like I said, check out tomorrow's pod with Locked On Nets, and then we'll be back for the post-game show. We appreciate the support as always. Like I said, let's get to 1,000 subs by the start of the regular season. We're about 160, 170 off there. So I think it's reachable. But for now, for myself and Frank, take it easy. We'll catch you guys tomorrow.